Hey Rebels, welcome back to the channel. If you're late to Bitcoin, I have good news for you because you're not late for the altcoin season. So in this video, I'm going to go over a chart that proves that altcoin season is popping off. So even if you're late to the Bitcoin cycle, that's okay. We have some room left in the altcoins. I'm also going to go over all of my trades to give you an idea of what I look for in a trade and why I entered those trades. So if that sounds good, please like and subscribe, and we're just going to dive right in. So I have in front of me a chart of the total 2 versus Bitcoin. Typically, what happens at the end of the cycle after Bitcoin has extended, you can see that we have these typical cycles in Bitcoin that are pretty regular, and we're just now getting to the very end of the Bitcoin cycle. So whether this cycle extends a little bit, there are reasons for that I've gone over in different weekly analysis, but either way, we are reaching the end of that Bitcoin cycle. So we can't expect lower prices in Bitcoin in the coming months. Whether that happens this quarter or next quarter, we're not actually sure, but you can just see that we're well and truly into this cycle for Bitcoin. But if we go back to this cycle here, this is effectively the altcoin cycle, where for brief periods of time, these altcoins will outperform Bitcoin and then give back their dominance. So they outperform, they give their dominance back to Bitcoin, they break out again. There's a brief period where they outperform Bitcoin and then they bleed again. And we're seeing that same thing play out right now. So while things are quiet in the altcoin space, and you can actually just see visually if you look carefully that this is a little bit longer. We've had a little bit longer of a drawdown in the altcoins versus Bitcoin, but effectively that's the whole point of trading altcoins, is because at the very end of the cycle, when people come in and they look at the charts and they see, well, shoot, I missed out on Bitcoin because we're already extended here in Bitcoin, they have to go farther and farther down the risk curve. They might look at things like Ethereum or Solana or Sui and maybe think that there's not as much opportunity there. So they have to go farther and farther down the risk curve. And also the farther you go, the longer you go, the more and more new people come into the market, and it gets very exciting, and you kind of reach a max euphoria stage. I don't think we're at that max euphoria stage. To me, it looks like the charts are telling us that we're at the very beginning of the altcoin season, effectively. So if you've been around this season, I have this on a monthly chart. I can kind of draw it down to a weekly chart. If you've been around this season for this cycle and you've found it very hard to make money in the altcoins, you can kind of see why based on this chart, because effectively Bitcoin has led the way the whole time, and there's been very few opportunities to make money in the altcoin space, and most of them have been short-lived and quickly give back their gains, at least in Bitcoin terms. And that's kind of what matters here. USDT terms, valuing it in the dollar, not as useful when you're trying to decide where you are in the cycle. So we can see that we've had a breakout of this downtrend. Typically, what follows is a five-wave structure to the upside. Seems like that's what's happening right now. We could be basically starting our corrective pattern, a corrective impulse in this wave, in this five-wave structure. So this could be a wave one. We could be entering a wave two right now. Hard to say. That's a little bit granular, not necessarily even important in this video, because effectively what we're waiting for is this prolonged period that is very short, I guess, but a prolonged period of outperformance in Bitcoin rather than the very short-lived minor outperformances that we've got in an overall downtrend. So it seems to be that we're trending higher. The charts are showing that we've had a larger upswing than we normally have. We're breaking out of this trend. So things are looking very good there. And as promised in the weekly videos, I would like to just go over each one of my trades. Now, I'm recording this on Monday, so by the time you see this, we could be in a very different spot. It seems like Bitcoin is showing a lot of strength, so I would not be surprised at all if we do see some strength this week in the altcoin space. It's difficult to actually predict that, or it's dangerous to actually try to predict every week which way the market is going. But as I mentioned in my analysis, and I'll clean this up a little bit, what we're seeing right now, as of the recording of this video, which is a few hours from the close, we're closing very strong. It's the highest weekly close that we've seen in Bitcoin. And we've also had an invalidation of this 3 red week signal, which usually signals lower prices. So the market is telling us that we're seeing some strength in Bitcoin, and we just printed a new all-time high price. If we are done with this seasonal period, this seasonal correction, then we can stack the probabilities in our favor that we've finished the seasonal correction and that we are going to see higher prices from here. How exactly that plays out, trying to decide exactly how we get there or predict exactly how we get there, can be very dangerous. So basically waiting for the market to confirm itself is what we want. We want multiple weeks above this trend line. We want multiple weeks above these tops. But by that time, the market could have really taken off in a larger way. So you don't necessarily want it's a tricky thing. Sometimes you need to enter before the market confirms it, but understand what your confirmation is to you in your trading strategy. So that being said, why don't we just dive into the various trades and I'll tell you basically why I got in the trades and what my thinking was at the time. So we'll start with Dogecoin. Dogecoin is typically a good runner when the market is buoyant. You can see that Doge performs very well. It does have some pretty drastic drawdowns. However, once we break trend, and I'll draw this over here, typically, just on a basic sense, once we break trend, we typically do pretty well. And you can see that it often forms kind of a rounded base where these lows start to round off and we get kind of a rounded bottom. And then right there is typically a good entry. That's what I did on this trade. Very simply, we broke this weekly downtrend and I bought near a retest. You can see right here, buying near a retest. Had this trade open for well, basically since we've done this. So this trade has basically just been hanging out in limbo right around break even for the last several weeks to a month. So, but either way, you can see that when we come back down to retest this cup formation, typically higher prices. So in this trade, I'm really just targeting the highs here, maybe 70% out at that point. Yes, we can go to the all-time high price. Absolutely. Nobody knows where this market can go, especially if we are getting into that stage where we're kind of reaching that max euphoria stage and having a huge influx of new participants. That being said, I basically just took my entry, same as here. We broke out, bought on a retest, broke out, bought on a retest, just biding my time and waiting. And I have my stop loss around here. I think I used 3x leverage here. So basically 33% below that price is going to stop me out. That's why I took the trade, and that's what I was looking for. And let's go on a daily perspective, and I will add the average true range. Average true range is definitely something that I like to use when I'm deciding whether or not to get in a trade. And if you're unfamiliar, the average true range is basically just a measurement of the bar size. So up here near the highs, things get more volatile. ITR is basically a proxy for the volatility. So the ranges of the bar get higher. And up at these levels, you don't really want to be interested in the market. You can tell that typically during these higher volatility times is not a good time to get in the market because you typically see some kind of correction. When things are very quiet, that's a good time to be interested in the market. We had a very similar thing. Things were very quiet around here and the volatility started to increase. So basically, that's what I'm looking for. I want to kind of see a bottom in the volatility. That's what it seemed like we saw on a large scale. And so that's when I bought in, we were at slightly elevated volatility, but much less than the peaks. That's basically the thesis there. And with Virtuals Protocol, I was able to make a fair amount of money here in Virtuals Protocol on a break of this double top. We had a double top in play that's kind of hard to see right now. And because we broke above it, that kind of invalidated that pattern. So I was actually able to make a pretty good trade here. Maybe doesn't look like much, but from here to where I got out, that was 160%. So that was a good trade for me. And same kind of thing. We can see high volatility times, not a decent time to get in the market. When I got in the market, we had just seen prices start to rise and volatility tick up. So I bought basically right after the volatility started to tick to the upside. We haven't seen that in virtuals yet. This trade is early. There is a huge caveat to that. We are still in this descending wedge pattern, have not broken out of it, but I was basically just bought it in this buy zone. I can see here there's kind of a support and resistance area from the past. And so I basically just bought it once we got down into this zone again. And for this one, same thing. I think I used 3x leverage, so my stops are basically somewhere below this pattern. I also use cross margin. A lot of people will tell you to use isolated margin, and I think both serve their purpose. For me, I like both, and so I'm using cross margin in this campaign because I would like to give a certain amount of my trades a little bit more wiggle room, and I also am keeping more margin on this account. So if I was really strict on the margin in my account, I would use isolated for sure. That way I knew exactly what I was. That way I know exactly if this trade goes to 33%, I'm out of the trade. I want to give myself a little bit of wiggle room because I don't want to get stopped out by the market. Those are my ideas there. I also have a buy order here. So I entered a smaller position while inside this pattern. And then once we break this top right here, we will be in a stronger uptrend and then also above this 50% level. So basically the market will be showing me more strength. So I do have a buy order to buy with the trend in the event that we continue to the upside. So that's virtuals. That's why I got into the virtuals. I'm going to start to speed this up now that you kind of get the ideas of my trades, now that you understand kind of why I get into trades. This is another one that is actually kind of hanging on a razor's edge here. We had a breakout of this. Well, let me take it to the weekly. I usually draw my trends on the weekly because they're very strong trends. We had a break of the weekly downtrend here. And even if you wanted to carry it out over to something like this, effectively, I bought it at support. Came down support. Unfortunately, the market's showing weakness here. We're kind of getting a bearish retest here. So it is likely that this one could go against me. And again, I haven't really waited for one of the confirmation signals that I do like to see, which is an uptick in volatility. Now, unfortunately, the uptick in volatility here happened while price was going to the downside. So we're getting a bearish retest here. Again, this position was smaller because I didn't have some of the confirmation signals that I was looking for. But either way, this is Sonic, good risk to reward down here. Could potentially see somewhat of a double bottom here forming potentially. We'll have to see if the market gets buoyant and takes off. It's likely that that could be the bottom. But the bottom is not confirmed yet with Sonic. But we do have pretty decent upside. There's 200% to the upside. So putting in a small position right here, not too worried if I get stopped out. Again, it's a smaller position, and I'll probably increase that position size when and if the market gets going in a heavier, in a stronger way. So my two biggest positions right now are Doge and virtuals, and a lot of these other ones are going to be a lot smaller. I will say that a lot of these things that I'm trading right now are pretty small cap, very small things to be trading. So that's one of the reasons why the positions are small, but I'm using leverage, right? So for a lot of these, I will basically have $1,000 position in general and will be risking 300 because if this goes in my favor, then I risk $300 to make almost $3,000. Okay. So this one's guns. This one, I'm not really going to go into what these projects are because that would take too long. I'm just really trying to give you an idea of why I get into the trade. So very similar thing. Bought this one early, very early actually. I think what we had was basically a breach of this downtrend and was buying on support here. Been in this trade for quite some time. Didn't quite get stopped out, but now it looks like the trade might be going my way. Again, very small position because we didn't have a bottom confirmed yet. And at the time of taking the trade, which had been a couple months ago, it looked like things were potentially starting to heat up in that way. So I like to be in the market, whether we see, because we were showing this strength here, buying down on a retest, that doesn't always work, and this is actually a very good showcase of that. But I had my stops here a little bit below the lows here, and I haven't got stopped out. So I had to sit at a pretty nasty loss here for a while. Now we're coming up, looking as though we want to maybe retest this trend from a double bottom. We will have to see how that one plays out. There's been a lot of hype about this token. So again, small position size, want to get in early. Send, this is a protocol on Sui. I think it's Sui Lend. Basically, it's a lending protocol on Sui. So the whole reason I get into projects like this is because it's basically just a beta to Sui. So when Sui performs well and there is capital rotation from people taking profits from Sui, it's likely to make it into these projects that are, performing well on Sui itself. So this one again, risk to reward is why I got into this one because the risk to the downside is relatively small, 35% of the downside with a 700% to the upside. Gives me a chance to enter this a few times without losing too much money. And so got into this one relatively early too. You can see that we haven't quite broken out of this kind of triangular pattern yet, but subtly we got the lower or higher lows forming. So that's what I like to see. Even though we're coming down here and contracting, I like to get in a little bit early, but again, have slightly tight stops because if this goes against me, then I want to get out of the trade. But we're seeing the higher lows forming over the last several months, which is a good sign. Subtle hints that buyers are stepping in earlier. So I like to see that. Again, mostly on this trade, risk to reward. That's basically what I can say about the vast majority of these trades. Okay, this one's our trade. Have a few trend lines going on here. Things to look for. We have this all-time trend line right here that we're tracking. Haven't broken out of that yet. Of course, there's a good upside to that trend, but we also have this trend line that we had broken out of, kind of basically sitting in this accumulation zone right about here. So basically, we're just going sideways. We're not trending in this trade yet. However, you can see that basically just buying in this accumulation zone could potentially give us a good trade because we're about 600% to the highs here. And I mean, honestly, if we got up to these levels, we don't really, I mean, we could take 75% out of the trade and just walk away and use that capital to rotate into other opportunities. What is the volatility looking like here? Yep, same kind of thing. We're just ranging in the volatility. We haven't had like any large spike in the volatility. So that would be something to watch if you're looking to get into our trade. I think anywhere in this range is probably a good area to be in, possibly tight stop loss below the range or even just below cycle lows would be probably a decent place to put your stops. Waiting for the volatility to increase, waiting for a break of this range. So a lot of these trades, I just find it, I like to be early. I'd rather be early. Sometimes I can bite you in the butt, but you have to just manage your risk accordingly. Because if one of these goes against you, it's likely that several of these could go against you. So that's something that you want to pay attention to. This one is also on SUI. This is a liquid staking protocol. It has the second highest TVL on SUI, and I think Send has the highest TVL on SUI. That's something that I like to look at, just showing that there's actual money on the protocol. It's being used. Um, Okay, so here again, we have this uptick in volatility. If I can move that over here, we have an uptick in volatility. Volatility is rising with the price. So we're seeing a potential breakout of this pattern. One of the reasons I got into this too is because subtly, again, we're forming higher lows. That's one of the first bullish signs that you can, even if we're just in a tight trading range, the subtle hints that this is being bought up in a larger way. While nobody is talking about this, I don't think anybody even knows what this is hardly in this accumulation zone, just now breaking this trend, potentially finding support here. And that's basically where I bought in, buying on support after a breakout of this trend, seeing the volatility increase. I think you're starting to see the picture. I'm probably repeating myself at nauseum here. And same thing with Say, that's another layer one, basically breaking out of this downtrend, accumulating in strength because I have this 50% tool. If you're unfamiliar, it's just the fib retracement tool with the settings of 1, 0.5, and 0. Anything in the top half is considered strong. Anything in the bottom half could be considered weak. And I basically have this one is a very tight stop here because basically preparing for a potentially strong week. So this is a very much shorter term trade for me. So I have my stops basically below here because if we wick down here, then it's all good. I'll get out of the trade. And even if I get stopped out and the market continues higher, I'm not worried about it because I have very little in the trade. That's the whole point. Risk to reward, risking very, very little. Basically, what is this? A 21-to-1 risk reward. So if the trade goes in my favor and we break these tops, I can get my stop loss to break even. I have no risk on the trade. For every dollar that I put into the trade, I have the potential of making $21. That's a pretty good trade right there, I think. So that's one of the reasons I got into that. And again, the volatility here started to rise as the price was rising. So volatility can be a little bit more predictive than price. Something you'll have to back test in your own market, but it happens time and time again. Effectively, interest dwindles. You can also use this as a map for psychology where during these higher volatility times, more interest in the market. So, and typically new traders arrive at the worst time. They're also more emotionally vulnerable and will buy and sell more. Well, they're not they don't have as much emotional control, and so they're much more emotional in their trading. And so when the bars are whipping around like crazy, it's a lot easier for them to want to FOMO into the market or FOMO out of the market either way. So that's one thing that you can interpret this as is what's the emotional state of the market. Well, if we're at higher levels here, we're kind of at an emotionally heightened state of the market. Not necessarily time that you want to jump into the market. Be patient, understand that it really was after the fact that we saw that this was a higher low or a lower high, then you could draw this trend line and basically walk away until we break that trend because then you've kind of have this rounding base. You've kind of proven the mood or the move. And so really, I mean, you look at this December of 2024 till now, that was almost a year. You could have drawn this trend line, set an alert, walked away for damn near a year and missed all of this pain, all of this suffering. And then once you come back, now the market's telling you a much different story. Now you're like, oh, okay, well, this huge trend line that we've had for many, many years, well, we just broke that. We're accumulating in strong territory. The volatility is starting to increase with the price increasing. Maybe this is a project that I want to be interested in. Now, like I said, I have this stops very, very tight because it's something that I was actually planning on getting into for just this week. And if it goes against me, then I'm not worried about it. I still think that this is a trade that's available, but I liked it because it's been holding this level for quite some time. And if this is an accumulation in strong territory and the markets are about to heat up, then I kind of wanted to be in that trade. So anyway, I think those are all of my trades. I wanted to mention that I do have every single one of my trades in my Telegram group, which I will list in the description, and basically will give you in real time rather than me going through every single one or having to come on and do a video every single time. I basically just post the reasons why I'm doing it just like that every single trade, and why I'm taking them. And then I have my trade results and from all of my different campaigns. So yeah, hopefully that was useful. I know it's kind of a long-winded one. But yeah, please, if that was useful, please comment, like, and subscribe. Give me some ideas for future videos. I'm happy to cover some things that you would like. If there's any particular tokens that you want me to go over or do some analysis on or look for possible trade setups for you, for your particular coin, let me know. Drop a comment down below or just hop into the Telegram group, jump into the general chat. I'm always down to have a conversation about crypto. That's what I love doing. I would love to do it 24/7 if I could, and maybe that will be, that will happen someday. That would actually be the goal. So hopefully this cycle will help that happen, and hopefully I can help you, along that journey as well. So I've been in crypto for quite some time, since 2021, lost my ass in the bear market and have been basically just learning and grinding ever since. And I think that this market holds a lot of opportunity for people, whether they're new or experienced or whatever. I think there's just massive opportunity in this market, not only from here to the rest of the cycle, but from here for probably the next 10 years. And so if we can hone this skill now, and then study during the bear markets, I think that we're going to really set ourselves up and our families up for success. So that was my little tirade at the very end. Hopefully this was helpful. Like and subscribe. Please leave a comment. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, guys.